Hi, I'm Mike Ignatoski, the creator of the PurpleWolf basketball spreadsheet, the spreadsheet that aims to help you get more enjoyment out of your tabletop basketball projects by doing a lot of the work, if not all the work, of tracking your team and players' game stats and season stats, as well as team standings and schedules. By doing that, you'll get more time to play your games, have more fun, and maybe take on projects that you wouldn't otherwise take on. This is video 3 of the 4-part video series on the PurpleWolf basketball spreadsheet overview. And in this video, I will go over how to create a league. PurpleWolf allows 3 types of leagues, just like the Green Fox and Blue Lynx. Same kind of deal. If you've used those leagues, you'll be very familiar with how these work. You can have historical team seasons, like the 62 Philadelphia Warriors, a historical league season, like NBA 1968 or ABA 1975, or the custom, which you can do almost anything. But let's talk about the historical leagues first. So the main helper for creating historical leagues is that there's a PurpleWolf helper data file, and I'll refer to it as the basketball reference data helper file or something like that. But it's on the Facebook group. You can download this file, and it contains all the data from 1950 onward for the NBA and ABA seasons. And in it, it includes, if you look down here, A, B, and C here, it includes really 3 kinds of data. One is just the standing structure, which really comes down to the teams and what their divisions are, where they are. The next thing it does is it has the rosters for all the teams in the league. That really just means all the players that played for each team. It doesn't really know when they switch teams if somebody got traded, but if they played on both teams, they'll be on both teams' rosters. It also includes the average minutes played per game as each player for each team. So that's helpful if you're tracking minutes played in your project. And it also has the league schedule, the regular season schedule for all teams in a given season. So those were very helpful. It makes it easy to set up a historical league using this data. So how do you create one? You decide what type you want to do. Whether you want to do a team season or a league season. You download the PurpleWolf basketball reference Excel data file, or the helper file from the Facebook group. It's in the file section. Then you can hear the instructions on the league help sheet within PurpleWolf spreadsheet, and it gives a detailed step-by-step instructions of how to create the different leagues. There's also some links on the videos to how to do an example of how to create each one, which are very helpful, and I highly recommend those before you create your league. This is an example of creating a historical league and how to do it using the league sheet, the league worksheet within the PurpleWolf spreadsheet. So you can see here in the upper left, it mentions this PW B-ball ref data. That's the helper spreadsheet. PW stands for PurpleWolf, B-ball, that's basketball reference, and the data. You have to have that open and just leave it in the background. You don't have to do anything with it, but it has to be open so that your PurpleWolf spreadsheet can access the data in it. And here I kind of outlined and numbered the steps, and this sheet acts and looks just like it does for similar type leagues in the baseball spreadsheet and the hockey spreadsheet. So if you've done those, you already know how to do this. But basically, it's step 1, where it says start here, is pick the league mode, which type of league. Number 2 is then pick the year. Depending on the year you choose, if you pick something between 68 and 76, and I should say throughout in PurpleWolf, it refers to basketball seasons with a single year. And that year is the year that the season was completed, not the year it was started. So if I say, well, this is the 89 Pistons, that's the 88-89 season. So when you enter the year, if you enter a year between 68 and 76, I think, when the ABA was in existence, it'll prompt you for which league do you want to use, the ABA or the NBA, and it'll list the teams appropriately. So that's step 2. Then step 3, if you're picking a team season, you have to pick which team you want to use, which team schedule do you want to follow. If you're doing a league season, you won't do step 3. The fourth one is you click this big purple button, which is it loads all the data from that basketball reference data file. The teams, the rosters, the schedule. And then you enter in, you name your league, you give it an ID, and then you click this black button, which is validate, which is make sure everything's okay. Now, when you pick your year, I should say, mention here that because it knows about these leagues, it automatically will fill in this sub-leagues and divisions per conference, or divisions per sub-league. And over here, it knows the names of those conferences and divisions if it has any. And therefore, it knows also what teams are in what division. You can see here, this is where it assigns those. This L, like the Golden State Warriors, it says Division L2. So you look over here, Division L2, that's the Pacific Division in the Western Conference. So that's kind of the yellow brick road of, the step-by-step of how you create a historical league using this league sheet. Now, a custom league's got a few more things going on. I got a little bit ahead of myself with the custom league, so I want to talk about one more slide with historical leagues, and this is the schedule. So this is an example of a historical league season schedule from 1987. But there's a few things in common with both historical league schedules that I want to point out, and some with all. But the first thing is here, for each schedule, it lists the number of scheduled games, completed games, and played games. And obviously, the question is, what's the difference between played and completed? And so you can see here, completed means all games with a score. And played are those that have been completed that have associated stats. And what that means is, you can see here in the score column, some have an asterisk. In PurpleWolf, you have the option to provide a result for a game with a score only. That means it'll use the score to figure out who won the game, and it'll count in the standings, but there won't be any associated stats. So the question may be, why would you want to do that? It's just a way to provide a convenient way for you to choose which games you want to play with and generate your individual stats, but maybe other ones you don't, but you still want to have the results reflected in the standings for all the games. So that's the way to do it. So when it comes down to these score-only results, you have two options. You can generate the score yourself, or you can use the historical score. And maybe, as far as generating yourself, maybe you have your own quick play option that you want to use to generate the scores for those games. Excuse me. Or if you don't want to do that, you can use the actual score of the as-played historical result. So if you want to use the historical result, which is listed over here on the right on these historical schedules, when you click on one of those scores, it'll ask you if you want to use that as the score-only result. And if you do, it'll copy the result into the score column. so you don't have to re-enter it. So it's just a convenient way to use that if you want to. But either way, the score only result is a nice way to, again, have all the games have a result and be shown in the standings, but you don't have to individually play all the games and have all the stats for all the games. So that's just what I wanted to cover on the historical league schedules. So custom leagues, they have a lot more of options to configure, but that's what makes them custom. But that's also what makes it flexible to make it whatever you want it to be. You can have 2 to 64 teams, and you can see here you have up to 2 conferences and 4 divisions per conference or sub-league. Sub-league is how PurpleWolf refers to conferences. You can have 2 to 16 teams in a division, although the first one can have 32. Your divisions can have different numbers of teams if that's how you want to do it. That happens in real life also. And also, as the creator, you'd have to provide all the info on your league. That includes the team names, their IDs, your divisions and conference names, and assigning each team to its division. And for your rosters, you have to have all the player names. Each need a unique ID, position. If you're going to use minutes played, you'll need to have their average minutes played, and you'll also have to have the league schedule. If your custom league is made up of historical teams, that can save you a lot of work, because that's where the PurpleWolf can use the basketball reference data file that's available on the Facebook group to automatically add those historical rosters with just a couple of clicks. And you can modify them also. Likely, like maybe you want to remove some players that you don't have in your game. But a custom league schedule, again, you don't have to know the whole schedule. You can build your schedule one game at a time if you want, just as you go. You can add players to your league during your league and during your season, but you can't remove players, because if they have any stats, it wants to keep all the stats. You can move players between teams at any time in your league, and it'll track the stats for each team that the player played for. But you cannot add any new teams to your league. Once you start your league, your league setup is considered to be locked, so you can't add new teams to your league. And this is showing the league sheet in PurpleWolf and how it's used to create a custom league. So you start by choosing this mode where it says custom league, manual configuration. Then you say how many teams you want. Here I chose 8. I'd enter the names of my 8 teams and gave them each an ID. Then I selected how many sub-leagues, which is conferences, how many divisions per conference or per sub-league. Once you filled in this, then you go over here and it tells you where you have to assign the names of your conferences or sub-leagues and the names of your divisions. I had an ABA group and an NBA group, so those were the names of my conferences. And since I only had one division in each conference, I didn't really need to name it anything. So I just put in this team, which you'll see why when you see the standings. But otherwise, it would just be ABA and ABA, which is kind of redundant. And then you give it your league a name and an ID that's kind of behind the scenes. And then when you click the validate, it'll make sure that you got everything assigned. Here's where you assign their divisions to your teams, and these division codes you can see over here relate to if L1 is going to be division L1 here. So that's how you assign your teams to your divisions. Once you have that done, you can see your standings. That kind of confirms the layout of your league standing structure. So here are the conference or the sub-league names, ABA, and this team. This is my division name. This is where that team shows up. So that's why team kind of is a convenient way. If you only have one division, this is where you just call it team. If I had multiple divisions, then I would have a different division name for each one of those. But in general, the conferences, here I could have just as easily made it one conference in two divisions. And the only difference is you have one sub-league or one conference, it'll just show up on the left side of these standings, and I would have two divisions on the left as opposed to one on the left and one on the right. So that's how the standings work. For the roster sheet, again, this is showing how you can take advantage of the basketball reference data file if you have historical teams in your league. And if you do, when you go to the roster sheet to enter your rosters, you can click this green button here that says load the historical team rosters. And then it pops up this form, and at the top, you can choose the team in your league. This is my team that I entered, Milwaukee Bucks 71. And then I pick the year, and then once I chose a year, it lists all the teams that played in the ABA or NBA in that year, and I could pick the one I want to load. So here it says the historical team roster. So I can match these up, click this green load button. You can see here, then it loads all the players and their data into my roster sheet, including their average minutes per game. And basically, then you just go to your next team, switch your team up here, pick the year, whatever, pick the team, load that. And once you have all your rosters loaded, you could then modify those. And that's what this is talking about here, is you can modify it, but likely maybe deleting some guys that maybe aren't in your game. Maybe somebody that only played 2 games, they probably didn't make a card for that person or that player. So this column here, if you double click in this row number column, it'll prompt you to delete that player. There's no undo, so be careful when you do it, but it's an easy way to kind of pare down your roster, historical roster, to match what you have in your game. Number 2 I'll mention is in your league, you have to have a unique lineup name or player name and player ID for all your players. So if in my league I had the 71 Bucks and the 75 Lakers, Kareem would be on both those teams. And I would then have to, when I would try to validate this by clicking this button to say I'm done with my rosters, validate it and lock it, it would detect, if I didn't change anything, it would say, hey, you got 2 guys named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Or maybe you have 2 the same ID. So I could go in here and then change these. And my recommendation is you want to just tweak them a little bit. Maybe the IDs, I would just add a M and an LA after it, each one, to make, so I would know which one was Milwaukee and LA. And the same with the name. Maybe I would, because he has kind of a long name, maybe I would rename the player name to be K period space MB for the Milwaukee Bucks, or just MIL or something like that. And then the other one would be K period LA for Abdul-Jabbar. So it's just some way to know that when you see the name, you know which Kareem we're talking about. So that's setting up the custom league rosters. And if you have teams that don't, or I shouldn't say, if you have leagues, if you have a custom league with teams that aren't historical teams, that don't have historical rosters, then you basically have 2 options. And if your teams are made up of historical players, but they're not on their historical teams, you could also use the helper data file, the basketball reference file, to help you copy one player at a time, but it'll copy multiple fields, their ID, their minutes, their name, and you'll have their name spelled correctly, and things like that. And that could be a scenario if you have all-star teams, or you drafted your own teams and split the players up differently than they were historically. That would be your situation. Your other option, and your only option if you have fictional players, is to manually enter all the information. But maybe you already have it in Spreadsheet. You can just paste it in or something. But it is some setup, but it's what you got to do to get it started. But it's worth doing if you want to track your stats. And I'll show here in this next slide kind of the workflow if you want to use the copy paste from historical players. So you'd open up that basketball reference helper spreadsheet here. It's called historical rosters, and it has a few tabs on it. One of them is the roster tab, and once you click that, you'd click this copy player mode button, and it'll turn this to on. And then in your PurpleWolf spreadsheet on the roster page, you click, there's a button called toggle paste player mode. So you'll click that, it'll start to be off. When you click it, it'll go on. It'll just go on and off. But turn that on, so that means it's set up to paste, and this one's set up now to copy. Then you go back to your historical spreadsheet and find the player you want to copy. Maybe you might want to use these season, league, or team, or even their name filters up here to quickly find who you want. Then you click their player name. When you do, you see it puts this dotted line around all these fields, their ID, their name, their position, through the minutes per game, and it copies that. And then you go back to your roster sheet and you click on the first blank player name cell, like right here, and it will paste in all those fields. You have to assign the team ID because it doesn't know what team you're going to be on in your league. But it saves some work. It definitely, if you want the minutes played or something, and it definitely helps out with the spelling of players' names if you care about that. But that's up to you whether you want to, how you want to get those players in. But that's just an option if you have teams with historical players. The custom league schedule. Again, I'll mention you don't have to build it all at the beginning. But when you want to enter it, add games to your schedule, it's kind of a couple steps. One is first click this top button to unlock it, and then you have to enter in the data in these yellow headers, yellow column headers. You have to enter a season game number, which so it knows the order of the games in your league. The game type, which is basically R for regular season. If you leave it blank, actually it'll automatically put a regular season in. But in an update, I'm planning to allow for regular season or postseason. Then you need to add the game ID, and this can be as simple or as, I don't want to say sophisticated as you want it to be. The simplest is the same as the game number, just game number 1, 2, 3, whatever. Or you can, like I did here, I put the number and then added some info so when I looked at it, I could tell who was playing in the game. But you can do however you want, but each game ID has to be unique. There are no duplicates allowed. And then you'd add the visitor team ID and the home team ID. And those are the only things, those 5 columns which you need to add to the schedule. And then when you click this lock button, it'll fill in these other 4 categories, or columns, I should say. The team names, and it'll also fill in their game number, like what game number it is for that team. And they don't have to be the same. It's possible that, depending on how your schedule works, that one team, it might be their 3rd game, and another team could be their 4th or 5th game, or something like that. So anyway, that's how you fill in the schedule. Now, for all leagues, there are some things that basically help dictate how your league is going to work. Maybe a better way to say it is how you want your league to work. So there are a few options to set, and ideally you'd want to set some of these before you start your league, just so that all your games are played with the same parameters. One of them is, do you want to track minutes? And if you do, so this is a snapshot of the options sheet And these options 4, 5, and 6 all have to do with tracking minutes. And the first one is whether you want to, basically, what do you want to use minutes or not. It says validate minutes played, and that's kind of goes along with it. But you could almost think of it as, do you want to even log the minutes played or do anything with it? Because if you do, then there's a couple things that come into play. One, it would be the validation. When you switch periods in PurpleWolf, what it will do is if you have this option set on, it'll make sure you have all the minutes appropriately allocated to your players and assigned, that you have the right number of minutes there. And if you're missing any, it'll tell you, or if you have too many, and it'll tell you to basically fix it. It'll also kind of give you you can set, once this is on, 5 and 6 you can turn on or off. That depends what you want to do. These are just kind of alerts. And the second, number 5 is just a confirmation of, before you assign minutes, do you want to double check that before you do it. And number 6 is whether you want an alert to pop up, when a player reaches or exceeds his average minutes per game. So that's, again, a choice you can make. But 5 and 6 are just how you want to deal with the minutes. But number 4 is really whether you want to use minutes or not. Another option, or 2 other options that go with the event logger, are number 7 and 8 here, which have to do with certain events that are effectively like heads and tails on a coin, of events that kind of go together. So when you have a blocked shot, the other side of the coin is whose shot got blocked or who missed a field goal attempt. Similarly, option 8, if you have a steal, the other side of that coin is who they steal it from or who turned the ball over. So when these options are on, when you select a blocked shot or a steal in the game event logger form, it'll not allow you to continue unless you choose the add-on player that either missed the field goal if it's a block, or that got the ball, that gets the turnover or on a steal. So just make sure that those stats are going to jive. Again, I'll say you can change these during your season if you want to, but I strongly recommend that these something you want to get set at the beginning, just so it's consistent throughout your league play, especially with these number 7 and 8 and number 4. The alerts, that's up to you. You might want to start with them and then maybe turn them off, but they're not as, I would say, important to get right at the beginning as 4, 7, and 8. Another area of setting up your league has to do with some settings on the config sheet. They're here because they're not just kind of on off. They're more like what's the value here, the value being, or what's the number you're using. So this is on the config sheet. Yeah, this color is something you can change whenever you want, if ever you want. But these ones below it here and over here on the right are ones that you would like to get set right at the beginning. So number 1 is, how many people do you want to allow on your bench? I don't know what the specific rule is. The NBA, I think typically teams will address maybe 12 or 13 players. I think they may be allowed to have 15. But you can set it however you want to do it. So by setting this number, I think it shows what the default is. But you can change it to, there's a range for each of these. I think this one could range from, maybe it's 5 to 10, I forget. But anyway, so you could set the maximum players on the bench, the minutes per regulation period. So this is 12. It goes to the NBA as by default. But you could change it if you want to do something different. the minutes per overtime period. Again, this is 5 like the NBA. And this is kind of just a preference here, this one at the bottom, which is when you're assigning minutes played, if you're using minutes played, that what's the default number that you want to assign as a kind of a minutes played chunk. So that shows up in that event log, or like do you typically make your subs at every 3-minute intervals or 6-minute intervals or 4-minute intervals or 2-minute intervals? Whatever that interval is what you'd want to have this set to. You can always change it in the event logger form, but this just saves you from a couple clicks if it's already set up the way you want it to be. So this is something else I would recommend you do at the beginning, but this isn't as critical to do at the beginning, whereas these timing of periods and stuff, that's something you want to get right at the get-go. Over here on the right, in this group B, these all have to do with fouls. And, the fouls in the game rules can get kind of complicated depending on, I don't think they've always been consistent in the NBA and other things of how many fouls resulted in what the bonus situation was, whether it was, 3 to make 2, or you just get 2 shots, or what's 1 and 1, or I don't even know the history of all the foul rules. But related to fouls, these are the settings you can configure in PurpleWolf. So number 1 is, what's the number of team fouls that results in the bonus? Like this, if it's this 5, this would mean the 5th foul would result in, a team in the bonus. Now, PurpleWolf doesn't enforce the game rules of, okay, that means somebody has to shoot a free throw. But in the spreadsheet, on the score sheet, like in the scorebook part, when it tracks the team fouls, that's where it would change the color of the number of team fouls in a period once it reaches this number. Similarly, in overtime or in an overtime period, what's that number for reaching this bonus status? And this is kind of complicated now with fouls in the last 2 minutes and all that stuff. This doesn't really track that. So as far as that stuff goes, you have to deal with that. This is just number of fouls. And the last 2 here have to do with personal fouls. So this first one is, what's the threshold for somebody being considered in foul trouble? And this is just kind of a score sheet configuration option that once the player reaches this number, his personal foul cell will change color so it indicate that they're in foul trouble. And then the bottom one is, what's the number of fouls before you get disqualified or foul out of the game? So then when it reaches this number, it'll change the color again so you can identify that, oh, this person fouled out. So those are some of the settings on the options sheet and the config sheet that you want to, I'll say, get figured out before you really start your league. One other thing with all leagues is that you want to have a default starting lineup for each team. You don't have to set this all at once, but I would highly recommend it just before you load a game into a score sheet, that those teams that you want to play have their default lineup figured out. So over here it kind of shows the lineup editor, and you can see this bench limit. This is connected to that, this number right here. So that's where that 7 comes from. So that's where you want to get that set to be whatever you want it to be. And the lineup, again, you can change the lineup after you load it in the score sheet. This is just kind of your default starting lineup, but it's easier to just tweak it than to make it on the fly each time. So you have, depending on what your roster size is and what your bench size is, your bench limit, that might determine for each game which players effectively are in the did not dress, or who are the healthy scratches for a given game. So that's how the default lineup and the bench limit all come into play, and your how many players are on your roster. Oh, I'll mention one more thing. So this over here is the lineup sheet. You can see here, this is where it saves your starting lineups. You can have up to 15 in a lineup. That's the max. And this secondary one, you could pretty much ignore it because it's only used when you modify a the lineup when it's from the score sheet. So you load a game, it loads the default lineup. Then if you want to change that lineup, you can do that there. Behind the scenes, it saves it to the secondary lineup, then loads the secondary lineup into your score sheet. So it's really just kind of a lineup scratch pad. So I'd recommend you just kind of leave it alone, even if it has stuff in it, but that's what it's there for. All right, so that's the lineups. I'll mention here, as far as the positions go, these positions are strictly informational from Basketball Reference. You could actually change them on the roster if you want to change what their position says. That PurpleWolf never uses that position to figure anything out, but it's strictly for your benefit, maybe to help you figure out where you want to, who should be playing or whatever. That's the end of this video number 3 of the overview series. I hope you watched the last video, video number 4, which will cover and give a live demonstration of how to create a historical league, cover some miscellaneous and possible future features of the PurpleWolf spreadsheet, and basically wrap up this whole PurpleWolf overview series of videos.